So, a big part of this film is basically a story of discovery. All my life, I've read the classics, really old texts. And when I was younger, I was intrigued, but I didn't understand. And as I began to do this telescope work and I began to challenge mainstream narratives, a whole new door opened up to me, and I went back to all those old texts. Texts by authors who are held up as great men. We've got Omar Khayyam or Marcus Aurelius or Manilius or any number of names that I could name off from much older times, apparently, of people who viewed the world by a four-element scheme and described the sky in a much different way than the sky is described to us now. And for my part, those authors were trying to tell us something critically important, critically important. And what it comes down to is when you challenge certain things, like whether or not the moon is what we've been told, many minds shut down. But the truth is that open mind who will look for themselves will in fact find what I'm telling you here to be correct, that things have been misdescribed and that those older authors were trying to tell us something about our natural world and the sky above us that was of vital importance. One of the things that I began to learn quickly is that the idea that the sky is a clock was never lost by the powerful institutions of this world. And while the average man or woman may look at their wristwatch or their cell phone to determine, is it noon yet? There are places in this world that still determine noon when the sun is at solar noon, true noon, or its highest point in the apex for that day. As a matter of fact, when you look at your clocks during the course of a year, you'll be lucky if you get close a couple, 2, 3, 4 times to actual noon. When your clock is telling you it is noon, it is not noon, actually. And this brings us into a whole other vein. In the fall of 2017, I was censored. I had a YouTube channel with nearly 100,000 followers taken out, and it was done in October. And right now, as we film this, we're at the same point of the year again, and censorship has gone rampant. Once again, the freedom to speak, the freedom to think, freedom of expression is being decimated by major corporations. And I will maintain to everyone listening, it's being done to the sky clock. That's why all this is so critically important. It's why we need to get back to the basics and understand what those older authors were trying to tell us and observe the nighttime sky again with telescopes, with binoculars, even with just your naked eyes, because truly it is the only clock we have for this world. And as I predicted this summer, that when we came to October, this point in October again, the censorship would rear its ugly black head again. It has, in fact. As I write this, everyone's holding their breath that I know to see if all the work they've put in to talk about things and to freely express ideas is still up and running at the end of the day because of censorship. And I'm here to tell everyone listening that censorship is being geared to a sky clock, which so many of us were never taught a single thing about. And that therein is really the importance of this film. It's about a guy who got a telescope, learned the mainstream ways, went out, observed the sky, and over time began to realize, wait a minute, what I'm observing here does not jive with what I've been told. Over decades, realizing that most of what I've been told is not a true picture. And when you look at all these things, you'll get the people that want to come in and say, oh, those are aliens and all this. And for the record, every single thing you will see in this film, with few exceptions, is human technology in my point of view and within our atmosphere. We will likely include some work I did with an optics expert to kind of prove that out in more than just an experiential way. There are things like the lunar wave. I can't tell you certainly what the lunar wave is. I can tell you certainly it wasn't caused by planes. Well, to be honest, if it was caused by some flying thing, it is silent and invisible, which seems a little unlikely to me. But the point I'm making here is there is technology up in that sky above your head every moment of every day that you have never been told about. And when you look at the nighttime sky, unless some of this technology has lights on it or you have very good spectral equipment to film with, you will never see it until it is backlit by the moon. And that is much of the mission that you will see here, using a full moon to sit there endless hours, 6, 8, more than that, hours a night, to try to catch something being backlit by the moon. And there's irony in this too, because back in the 90s, when I got that first robotic telescope, The mainstream view of viewing a full moon is why waste time on it? There's no shadows, it's boring, there's nothing to see. So the very act of me going out with a telescope to look at the one thing that most astronomers have little interest in, a near full moon where the craters aren't very visible, is the very thing that opened up a door, and it will be covered here. I'll show you an endless litany of strange things that I've filmed. And again, my point of view, it is all human technology, all of it. And we'll get to things like the shooting orb, which is in and around chemtrails, which is a word that's fallen out of favor, but I make no apology. I've done my due diligence. I've looked at the modern jet engines, and I've come to the conclusion that the engineers who wrote a number of papers say that the modern high bypass jet engine is nearly incapable of making what's called a contrail. Look up someday. Look at all those lines in the sky. It's just more of the things that people take for granted, and they don't observe and understand what's going on. And I'll show you some strange things about daytime trails in the sky too. I'll show you the little orb that is seemingly under its own power, but again, I assume is human technology. Well, I got my first telescope, and it was right around 1994. Matter of fact, it was some months before Hale-Bopp showed up in the sky, because that was the first comet that I ever viewed with a scope. At the time, it was quite an expenditure. It was about like getting a car. It was a fully robotic 8-inch Meade telescope back when Meade was made in the USA. And I had been for years wanting a telescope, learning everything NASA had to tell me, and Astronomy Magazine, and all those things. And that's really where it all started. And I began looking up and filming things. It wasn't long before I got into astrophotography. Of course, back then we were all still using film, so it was a lot more work to do things. But during the course of shooting with an old Olympus and film and doing the manual track along with the scope track to try to get perfect astro shots, I began to realize that I couldn't replicate what the Hubble was doing. And at first I thought, well, of course it's me. But as time went on, I began to realize that I'm not even in the same ballpark. And I began to question things. And when you first begin to do that, I think the average person questions their own abilities first. You know, the guys in the white lab coats clearly know what they're doing. But that's really where it all started. And it wasn't till many, many years later that the whole illusion that had been painted of what's above our heads began to fall apart for me. But that is the first telescope I've owned, and that's where it all began. I think ever since I was young, I had wanted a telescope. I remember my father was a teacher, and it was back in the days when only one member of the family had to hold a full time job to hold down a household. But I remember looking in the back of the magazines and seeing these little, like pot belly scopes, and just never could get one. As a kid, my father gave me a microscope, actually. So I went the other way, started looking at really small things. By the time I'd gotten out of the Marine Corps in the early 90s, I was all set to try to invest. And it took some doing. I'd never been in debt like that except for a car. And I did, in fact, go into debt at the time for quite a bit of money. I wasn't a rich person, but it was worth every penny. When you take for granted things like the sun and the moon and the sky, and you just accept all the things you've been told, there's a whole universe out there waiting for you, pun intended. And it's going to change when you begin paying attention and looking at it carefully. So years went by after I got out of the Marine Corps, and we'd moved around a bit, and we ended up in Lemon Grove in San Diego. And I hadn't had the scope out in a while. I had used it from time to time, and I had my family coming over, and my nephew and my brother-in-law got there, and there was a supermoon. It was May. If I remember correctly, the supermoon was in May of 2012. I think I have that right. My nephew and I had an eyepiece. I didn't have a way to film at the time. And we were at the eyepiece looking at the supermoon, a full supermoon. And all of a sudden, my nephew shouted out, "Uncle, Uncle, there's a black triangle going across the moon." And so I thought, well, wow, he was lucky he got to see that. But sure enough, I got up to the eyepiece. I saw it. My brother-in-law saw it. This went on for 2, maybe 3 hours, which is an unusual thing if you think about it, because from our apparent view of the moon here in the world, the moon is moving through the sky. And from 2, maybe 3 hours, we tracked objects going in between the end of my telescope and the moon, and they were absolutely black and triangular. My brother-in-law at one point claimed to see something like 5 or 7 of them in formation, and that was what got me going. The very next day, I went out to start getting the little coupling tools I needed to get a digital camera onto my scope. It would be the first time I used a digital camera, but that's what started it all. From that moment, I was determined to film something. And to be honest with you, you kind of feel like when you first see that for the first time, you're thinking, I'm going to film for a year. I'll never see anything like this again. But as fate would have it, it wasn't too long before I began to catch some strange things. So you're going to see a clip here that we named the boomerang early on. It was one of the earliest objects I filmed, to be sure. And while I've forgotten what exactly the first object was, it was one of the earliest clips up on my YouTube channel, which is how I know my memory there is correct. It's quite an astounding piece of footage. It gives you a really serene, floating sense of things. And what the average person who just sees the clip once might not understand is what you're witnessing there as a thing comes into frame, it spins a partial turn one way, then it spins a partial turn another way, then it kind of noses down, nose up a little bit, and flies out of frame. And when I saw that, that was just fuel to the fire to get me to film longer and harder. It was the first thing that I had filmed that was not just like a little round, black, backlit orb of some kind. The technology that I've referred to here that is up there all the time. And it did a lot to get me to buckle down and commit to the basically 4 years of nearly nonstop filming day and night that I did. So folks should be aware about the following. Truly, many of these objects that we're going to present here, we can't tell you certainly what they are, but I can certainly tell you that the filming of many of the particularly round black things and other objects like that have been filmed by many other people at this point. If we had included everything that I had shot that qualified as an object of some sort, there would be probably well over 1,000, maybe close to 2,000 clips. Almost impossible to cover them all. But what we have done is pared them down to things that are certainly objects or events of interest. When I was in Southern California, just where I was in the middle of the city, I think I might have filmed 1 or 2 bats in all that time. Not a lot of bats there. We do get birds from time to time. There are methods that we use to try to vet these out, and just the overall appearance from years of experience let you know whether or not it's likely that's a bird. One of the methods we use is lay down a perfectly straight line, because very few birds fly in a perfectly straight line. The problem becomes if you don't have a long run of an object in a clip, that's not always the be-all and end-all, which is to say, if there was any doubt, it was not included in this film. There are some things that are interesting that we can't explain certainly, but just to be perfectly clear, most of the black objects, and they're black mostly because they're backlit in many occasions, they've been replicated by many, many people that I'm aware of that are out there filming with telescopes. You know, if I had to think back to the first things that I actually captured on film, what we call the boomerang clip is going to be one of the early ones, but it would be one of these little black, roundish objects, I'm almost certain. I talked with my wife. Neither one of us can really remember exactly what the first is, but I know that the clip we call boomerang was one of the first, which I know will be shown here. And it's ironic because, so from May of 2012, the fire gets lit because we see all these basically black triangles in the sky. So then I began filming. It seems like it was just a few days before I caught something, and it would have been, again, one of these black things or the boomerang or something to that effect. So fast forward to September, we're getting near the equinox, and lo and behold, I accidentally filmed what's been coined now the lunar wave. And that happened in September of 2012. It was not on the reported equinox day, but it was in fact on an equal day and night day. The equinoxes don't work in the way we're told, but that's a whole other story. So I'm filming, trying to film things transit the full moon. And what actually happens is this wave comes. And when it began, I didn't notice. And for some reason, it was unusual. I'd panned the camera down below the moon, and that's when the wave started to go up. And as I panned the camera back up to the center of the moon, I was using the little, the 3-inch LCD screen is what I was looking at the time. I didn't have a monitor. And then I saw the wave. And my first reaction is what everyone's reaction is. How do I explain this away? I thought this must be a technical malfunction or something like that. So I filmed the wave, and I literally reached over to delete the clip thinking it was a technical malfunction. For some reason, I didn't. A lot of time went by, and I kept thinking about it, going back and looking, but I was still at that point where I was trying to explain it away. And finally, at some point, it had been quite a while, I actually delete the clip off my computer, but that very same night I had the epiphany, and I instantly understood that it was a filmed event, and I ran back out, booted up the computer, restored the clip to the desktop, to the folder I had it in. And I looked at it and I realized this is proof positive. Just the way the camera panned proved that it was a filmed event. And then the study of that clip began. Just so people understand, first of all, I'm a digital person. I was ignoring the fact digital failure does not happen in an organic way. Everyone's seen it. You get straight lines, you get pixelation, boxy things. You don't get an organic line when a digital camera fails. But what really proves it is the camera pan. So when I panned the camera down, the wave started. I didn't notice it, but as I panned it up, I went above the wave, and the wave caught up to the camera, and that's proof positive that it's a filmed event. So then for a year, solid, smartest people I knew, other people that I sought because I wanted their opinion, looked at the clip, and it became a thing. And I was never really impressed with social media. I didn't want to open social media, but finally, in October of 2013, I opened a YouTube account and put up the 2012 lunar wave, and boy, all hell broke loose after that. There were basically two types of people coming. Some people were all, wow, that's amazing, I wonder what it is. And then there was a whole group of people that were attacking and saying that I had faked the clip. But, I guess the rest is history, right? The 2012 lunar wave was, after many years of research, actually shot on an equal night and day, or a true equinox. It was not reported as the equinox day, but that's a whole other story. To my knowledge, there has been no lunar wave film to date which is quite as crisp and revealing and in your face as the 2012 capture. As fate would have it, just the way that I captured it on accident proved that it was filmed event. The camera pan does that. And bright people and people who studied the clip knew that years ago. It took many years for very many people to catch on. It has all the fingerprints of what I call a classic lunar wave. Two waves, very crisp, very defined, and they've happened when they've happened. In this case, there's actually a pulse and some scan lines going on at the bottom of the moon, which have been revealed in later clips. But of all the clips, if you look carefully as the waves go by and you pick what I'll call a landmark on any point of the moon, as each wave passes, it displaces, like you're looking through water, it displaces what you're looking at. In other words, the entire image of the moon is displaced twice, once by the first wave and then again by the second. Currently, or as it stands now, from my point of view, the 2012 or first capture of the so-called lunar wave is the benchmark for all lunar waves. It still stands head and shoulders above everything I've seen, although there have been some astounding catches. I would further add, I'm not certain that everything that has been called a lunar wave is the same type of event that we're witnessing here, but that remains to be shown. Part of the arguments that erupted about the lunar wave was that first I faked it, and that intensified actually because I think it was a year and a half later, I filmed the second lunar wave too. So then I was the only guy who had filmed two lunar waves that people knew of, which actually wasn't true. There was another individual who had it in a clip, didn't realize it. But as that subsided, people began to say it was airplanes. The problem with that is let me tell you something. When you're sitting out for 6, 8, or more hours a night, looking at a moon or whatever you're looking at, you get bored to death, because the truth is when you film something, it's usually no more than 30 seconds. Truthfully, usually it's 5 or 10 seconds, whatever it is you film that's interesting. So if a plane is in the air, you hear it, you see it, and you try to film it with the scope just because it's something to film. And I'm in San Diego. There is an airport in San Diego. I was in between the flight paths, actually. There were many miles north of me and many miles south of me. But the point here I'm making is if a plane is in the air, you can hear it and see it. And everyone began to say, that's clearly jet wash from a plane. I'm sure within the course of the scope of this film, we'll show many of the planes that I filmed transiting the moon, and you'll see that it's not the same thing. It just isn't. As a matter of fact, in the 2012 clip, you can see a pulse and all kinds of things going on as the wave starts, where lines are going in different directions, up and down, diagonally, side to side, but that's not really the point. I filmed 5 lunar waves in total, and I think there's other people that have filmed it more than I have now. And I think there's roughly 30 people who have filmed it now. And of all those people, one person claimed they saw a plane, but the rest of us didn't see a plane. And to be perfectly clear, when I film with the telescope, I keep a set of binoculars there. And while I didn't use the binoculars for the 2012 footage, it wasn't that dark yet. I think it was shot at 8:30 at night, San Diego time in September. It wasn't pitch black yet. Point is, you could see a plane. But every other time that I filmed the wave, I scanned the sky, I looked for causes, I did all these things. And unless there is a plane that is 100% silent and either invisible or moving so quickly you couldn't see it, it's not a possible explanation. So if you look to the top left of the moon here, you're going to see a very small black object that's going to take a really long run across the moon. And I'll preface this all, when it hits that big bright crater, there's going to be a blink in the video. The reason for this is I was taking stills, which are higher resolution, hoping I could zoom in. I think I took 2 on this one. But we have many, many examples of objects like this that we track across the face of the moon, some of them over a minute. They're traveling perfectly straight. They're absolutely technology, in my view, and they're absolutely made by human beings and up there every night. It's just that without good spectrum filming equipment or the moon to backlight it, you'll never know they're there. So I think there's a sequence of film that was run in the trailer for this that shows my first equipment. My first equipment was an 8-inch Schmidt cast grain telescope with a Canon T2i that was only 16 megapixels. I think it was 16 megapixels. That was my first equipment. And initially, I would remove the rear cell to the telescope. So basically, take the lens off the camera, the scope becomes the lens for the camera. And then I would look at the little 3-inch LCD window. I did that for, I don't know, probably close to a year before I began to get more sophisticated and run monitors and other things, so I didn't have to look at that tiny window. But that was the first technology that I brought to this. So at the point I set up the YouTube channel, and I think if I'm remembering correctly, I'm reasonably sure, it's October of 2013, and one of the first clips up is the lunar wave. Actually, believe it or not, I had amassed a year's worth of footage, so I had some interesting things to show. The boomerang was one of those things, or what we call the boomerang, and YouTube shot them down because of the music. You know, it was the early days of YouTube, and they said we couldn't run it because of the music, so those got taken down. So essentially, one of the very first clips is the 2012 lunar wave with no audio, by the way. I just had like text up in frame, and like a floodgate opened. It caused a stir everywhere. I was getting to the point where I literally changed my phone number and my email addresses. That's how how big a deal the lunar wave became. And I didn't see it coming, but after it started, I realized, and as I mentioned before, I'm waiting for someone else to film it. I'm thinking, well, people saw this, they'll go out and film. So it's a year and a half, I forget. It was near the spring the next time that I filmed it, and I become the only guy who's filmed it twice now. And it intensified even more from there because the attacks and the accusations that I'd faked the footage just intensified. So yeah, it got pretty brutal for a while, but then, sanity comes back to itself over time. And to this day, there are still crazy people that like to attack, but it is what it is. And it's been shot, I think, more than 30 times now. Actually, it's been shot in front of Jupiter twice now. So as time went on, I began to upgrade my gear. And along the way, I got a 12-inch Meade telescope, which was really big. And you'll notice in this film, anytime the moon looks gold in hue, that's shot with the 12-inch scope. Don't know why, but everything shot with that scope had a gold hue to it. That scope failed 4 times, and that's when I came to understand that Meade scopes aren't made in the United States anymore. It's down in Mexico, and it was a lot of money for the upgrade. So I made Meade take the scope back, and I went and I got a Celestron 11-inch scope. At the same time, I upgraded to a Nikon with 36 megapixels, which was a big jump. You'll notice the quality of the footage in this film if you pay attention. And also a Canon with 25 megapixels that I converted to full spectrum, which probably needs to be qualified. So the visual spectrum is within the image, but a little bit of UV and a little bit of IR. And from what I understand, not very far into IR and UV because the rules changed in the 70s or something like this. I've forgotten. Something to do with military application prevents us from getting good IR and UV tools. But anything that appears pinkish in hue in this film is shot with the full spectrum camera. Actually, there will be one very interesting clip that we call the Vortex, where I had two camera systems on it at once. One was visual spectrum in 36 megapixels with a huge telephoto and a doubler on it. The other one was the full spectrum camera on my Nikon, and only the full spectrum camera could see the vortex. So that's an interesting piece of footage that you'll see here. One night we were filming with my full spectrum camera on the telescope, and by chance, it was a night where we had taken my visual spectrum camera and put it on a very good telephoto with a doubler. So we had a telescope with a full spectrum camera looking at the moon, and we had a tripod with a very powerful telephoto with a doubler looking at the moon. The telephoto was visual spectrum. The camera on the telescope was full spectrum. I took a break in the shift of filming, and my wife sat down for a short while. And when I came back out to relieve her, she reported that she saw a blink, and she wasn't sure whether she should keep the clip or not. So she decided she would. And to put a frame of reference around this, when you're filming as much as we did, you get such a sheer volume of high-def video that what you would do is you watch what you're filming, and if you don't see anything, you delete the clip, or you'll fill up every hard drive you have in a very short period of time. So getting back to the story, my wife informed me as I thought I saw a blink. I get into the editing room, and it takes me a while because the blink is quick. It's like a second and a half or something. I don't know. I don't remember the exact time. It's very quick. And it's a pink, because it's shot with the full spectrum, it's a pink flash that goes up. You know, the moon's like right here, and a pink flash goes off. And I saw it, and I thought, well, wait a minute, that did look interesting. And I started thinking, man, the fact that she even caught that is impressive, and then had the foresight to save the clip. Both those things impressive. Skilled observation going on there. But I get into the editor, and I begin to zoom in on it and slow it down, and lo and behold, it's a vortex. So I start to get excited because I realized I've got two camera systems going on this, and I had them synced. So I get into the visual spectrum to find the occurrence captured in visual spectrum, and I can't find it. And I start thinking, well, maybe the telephoto, it's not magnifying as much. Maybe that's the problem. I spend hours and there is no trace of it, and finally come to the conclusion that the visual spectrum could not see the event. That is another piece of footage you'll see here, and that is one of the more vexing captures that we managed to pull off. So what we call the vortex clip is maybe among the most unique things we filmed, and I'll give you the backstory. I had been filming for quite some time. My wife came out to relieve me. We were filming with the 11-inch telescope with a full spectrum 25 megapixel Canon. The reason it's almost a miracle this clip made it is because when you look at the original footage, it looks like a small group of pink pixels blinks in the left upper corner above the moon, and the fact that my wife even caught that and then had the presence of mind to save the clip is a bit astounding. But what's actually been captured here is by chance that night we were filming with two camera systems. I had a 36 megapixel Nikon with a huge telephoto lens with a doubler focused on the moon. At the same time, the footage you're looking at here that looks pink was my 11-inch telescope with a full spectrum Canon on it. Here's the strange part. The telephoto in visual spectrum didn't detect any of this, so we're reasonably sure that it could only be seen in full spectrum, and that is IR, visible, and UV. Not very far into either end of that spectrum, but nonetheless. And as you can clearly see, it's some kind of a vortex, and it makes you wonder, if we could film in full spectrum every night, how often would we see this kind of thing? Nonetheless, astounding clip. So a lot of people are asking, how many lunar waves did I catch with the old equipment? And to be honest with you, I'd have to go back and review. One thing, when I'm using the old equipment, you will notice the moon has usually a bluish hue to it. The reason for that is because of a city light filter I used to like to use. But if I remember correctly, maybe 2 lunar waves on the old system and the following 3 on the newer equipment. I know I filmed one during an eclipse, and that certainly had to be with the newer equipment. As a matter of fact, I think I filmed one with the full spectrum camera. So I think there's 3 on the newer system. But really what the new system did was open the door for like the weird objects that you see. And that's a whole story within itself. When I first started doing this, I was accepting the idea that there was satellite tracking tools that I could use. And for a long time, we would sit there, find out when a satellite was supposed to transit the moon, and we'd go out and film. I can't tell you how many times I tracked through tracking systems for satellites a transit of the moon in my area, went out and filmed nothing. It got to the point early on where I'd say, well, if it's within 5 or 10 minutes of this reported time, I'll accept it as that satellite. But that was before I began to use logic to reason it out. Truth is that if you're 5 or 10 seconds off and the trajectory is slightly wrong, it's not even going to be in the same ballpark. And that's when I got to looking at how they track satellites. And you're told flat out that the tracking software they provide is not accurate. So as I got into that, I said, well, where did it come from? It's like from Cheyenne Mountain or something like this. I forget one of the official places that provide the basis for the satellite tracking. And that opened up a whole door, because it wasn't long after that that we began to realize that satellites just don't exist as they're described. And here's an interesting thing. All the way back in 2013, 14, I'm making YouTube clips, and on Google, you could literally look up that there were roughly 20,000 satellites, and I forget how many broken ones they claim, but there were thousands and thousands. Right now, in 2018, if you go up to Google and ask how many satellites you are, in the last 2 months, it has changed from 2,500 down to roughly 1,500. And they're also shifting the numbers, claiming that there's 2,500 broken ones now, and I think 11 or 1,200 working. In other words, it's the barn and animal farm is what's going on. When I first started documenting this and doing research, there were roughly 20,000 satellites up there. And I'm here to tell you, satellites don't exist as they are described, certainly not in space. And from my point of view, everything that I've ever filmed is in our atmosphere, and it's provable from the work that we did with an optics expert who could value out pixels and distances. So this is quite an astounding clip. It was shot with the full spectrum camera on the 11-inch scope, but with visual spectrum, you would not have been able to see the moon anywhere near this. You'll notice the moon looks a little blurry. That's because the full spectrum is peering through clouds, and we have this very unique double transit. And clips like this, we used to, in an editor, draw a straight line to try to determine, could this just be some random shopping mall balloon or something like that? These things don't qualify as that. By the way, I do have examples of just regular balloons. I'm not sure if we'll include them in the film, but in this case, I tried to track them past, but the cloud cover was so thick I couldn't get the full spectrum to light the sky enough. But it's just another one of those unusual clips. And these kind of disky shaped, round, black shaped objects that transit the moon, again, many, many people around the world have filmed them. And I would venture to say that objects like this are in the sky every night. You just can't see them. There was a point where I finally suspected that some of the old religious accounts, the old alchemical accounts and other things, and many of the world religions, not just Christianity, were telling you the truth when they told you that space was liquid. The problem was I couldn't get everything I needed with my telescope. I tried and tried. So I went to language, and I randomly made a test for myself. And I said, if I can pick some important text that the whole world was exposed to that has to do with the idea of space, and there is nautical language in it, then I will announce that I suspect that space is truly probably some kind of liquid, which is a very difficult thing to prove, by the way. So what I did is I took the JFK speech, "We're going to the moon." He actually gave that speech more than once, but anyone can look it up, man. We set sail on this new ocean. Just go look. It's nothing but nautical language. And shortly after that, I announced that probably space is some sort of liquid. And believe it or not, that didn't cause too many waves, to make a pun. Along the way of the YouTube channel, when I'm posting this footage, I began to scrutinize everything NASA was doing, and it became quite apparent that basically space agencies exist to ensure we know nothing about what's above our head. The biggest attack to date on me personally or content that I've made was when I exposed the Pluto mission to be the nonsense that it was. Those clips are still up on my YouTube. And I would mention, I made a lot of mistakes early on my YouTube channel, and I never removed any of those clips. I left them up. I did silly things like refer to the moon as a hologram. That was a huge mistake. I used the word facade. That was a huge mistake. I didn't have the language to try to describe what I thought I was seeing. But to get back to the point, it's a telling thing when you, as one person, simply take what NASA is showing as the first imagery of Pluto and you begin to take it apart. One of the earliest things we did was just open it up in Photoshop and jack the levels up in Photoshop, and you could prove that every pixel was a created artist's rendering. Even in some cases, the whole canvas had been tilted, and you could see the cropping as they laid it into the new canvas that would go out. They started to clean up all the Apollo images. The Earthrise over the moon, that was a proven fraud. The Earth was the wrong size, and that was proven. And there were, when you jacked up the levels, there were crop marks, square crop marks where they had laid the Earth image into the mocked up other image. But the point here is when I basically stated that, look, these images are all fake, this is all nonsense, all hell broke loose again. I think it was the Daily Mail in the UK. No, it was Gizmodo. Gizmodo picked up the story and the attack just went rife. Then pretty soon the Daily Mail and all these other big places picked up the story. They put a label on it like Pluto truthers or something to make it seem silly and low-minded, to the point where I knew how close to the target I was. I already did know, but that confirmed it for me, because what difference does it make if a man challenges a mainstream narrative and he's just a silly wrong person? What difference does that make? But what in essence happened is a full-scale attack on my YouTube channel was launched. And every clip I had ever posted, the thumbs up are so far ahead of the thumbs down, but not on that Pluto clip. It ran on Gizmodo, Daily Mail, and all these other places. Time Magazine or Newsweek Magazine starts calling shortly to interview me shortly after all that. But that one clip, since it's been up, I haven't checked in a while, the thumbs down have rivaled the thousands and thousands of thumbs up. So it goes to show you the reaction that people had just from one man challenging a mainstream narrative. And it's a telling thing. This has happened many times now, but I don't make any bones about it anymore. The space agencies, all of them are in the same club, and they exist to ensure you know nothing about what they call space.
My name is Randy. Well, I'm better known as Randy from Houston, but my name is Randy Bryant from Houston, Texas. And I own a mobile detailing service, automotive, aircraft, and marine detailing, and been doing that for about 35 years, or actually about 38 years, excuse me. But anyhow, it's a little bit about me. I'm just an everyday guy, just learning some really cool things about what's around us and observing the moon and daytime skies, asking a lot of questions. One of the first things that I captured, and actually I didn't even have a telescope at the time. I had gotten a video camera for Christmas, a little cheap Sony camera, and I was just shooting at the moon. I said, wow, this thing has a really good zoom on it. So I said, well, let me just zoom in on the moon and just see what I can catch. And so when I did, of course, I seen these little things flying by, and I'm like, wow, this is interesting. I've got to get me a telescope. So soon thereafter, I got me a telescope, and I started shooting the moon and seeing a lot of different objects flying past the moon, and it got my interest. And so that's kind of how I got started in the moon watching. One of the things about the moon that caught my interest was whenever I would zoom in on it I had the camera hooked to the telescope, and I would zoom in the telescope, and then I would take the camera and focus it in even closer, and I would look at all the craters and things. It was a world that I had never seen before. It got my interest. Of course, the more that you look at these things, the more curious you get, the more questions you have, and one thing leads to another. that was some of the things that just kind of got me started. And soon thereafter, of looking at the moon, one day I was just zoomed in real tight, and I saw the first, what I call the lunar wave. And at the time, that had only been like 6 or 7, I was the 7th person that caught the lunar wave. Well, the first one that I got, I was zoomed in real tight on the moon and didn't even know I actually caught it. And I was actually watching some of Crow's videos that he had, caught my interest. Super nice guy. I'm like, God, this guy's got really stuff going on. He really knows his stuff. And so I delved into his videos and I seen that he caught what we call the lunar wave. Well, that's what it was dubbed, as the lunar wave. Whether it's that or not, who knows? But that's what it was called at the time. And I reached out to Crow just as a chance that he would even get back with me, because a lot of time you think, people on the internet are just, they're unreachable. Well, he reached back to me with this just in a few hours. He texted me, or emailed me back rather. And I told him, I said, I think I caught the lunar wave. I would like to send you this video. Vent me out on it and just tell me what you think. He did. He looked at it, and probably 2 or 3 hours later, he got back with me and he goes, well, you did catch the lunar wave and it actually passed twice. And he said, that's a telltale sign that that is the lunar wave, because it'll come about anywhere from 15 to 18, 19 seconds apart. So, but he said, you zoomed in so tight on the moon that you really can't even tell if it's your backyard or what it is. He said, so get you a wider angle. So in other words, you can have the moon in the backdrop in a good view in your viewfinder, to where you can really see. And if it passes by when you're videoing, he says you'll get a good shot of it. So he said, at the time, I think it was around 2012 or something like that, or maybe a little after 2012, excuse me. He said at a certain time of the month here, he says, videotape it and we have a good chance of catching it. Well, I was just at the point of where I was going to turn my camera off because I had a long day's work and I was tired. It was about 9:15 at night, and I seen the first wave come right by. And of course, I was really excited. I was just like getting really nervous and just like, wow, what is this? And so I waited. He said, okay, 15 to 18 seconds and another one's passed. I waited. And actually the second one passed about 43 seconds later. It came by just as clear and crisp as it could be. And I was watching a big monitor at the same time here. So that time I really sent this one to Crow right quick. And of course, he was just like, well, sure thing. You can't deny that this is not what this was at this time. So that's kind of how I got started in the lunar waves. Those two right there is really what kicked me off on a whole series of other things that I've videoed and stuff. A lot of times I'll think about what the lunar wave is. Some say, well, that was just a jet passing by. I've seen jets pass by and see the shock wave or the exhaust wave. It's different. This is a distinct wave that rolls up. It's like a shock wave that goes right on the moon as it goes across and goes up. What it is, I don't know. Unless you're almost standing right there or had some kind of censoring equipment to be able to analyze that shock wave as it goes across. Now, as one of my grandsons, when he first looked at it, he made the comment. Now, I can't say that this is what this is, but he made the comment. He's a video game kid, and he says, wow, that looked like a hologram reset. Well, I thought that was kind of funny, but I don't know. It could be a hologram. It could be just a shock wave. It could just be something that's on the moon that we don't know about. Maybe the moon has attributes about it that we just don't know, but I would love to know more about it. In my time videotaping the moon, I have seen a lot of objects pass by. Birds, hawks, bats, bugs. You see it all. You see a lot of different things flying by. But there's a rare occasions that when you're sitting there, and this one particular occasion, my son and I was sitting there, we was watching a monitor, And I was actually telling them, I said, don't take your eyes off the monitor, because when you do, there'll be something that passes by. And while I was telling that phrase, I go, oops, did you see that? And there was nine disc craft that, like if the moon is here, there was 9 disc craft that transited across. Now, I've got video of geese flying by. I've got still frames of these geese flying by, and a goose will fly anywhere from 1,000 to upwards of maybe 10,000 feet above the ground, even at nighttime. Now, most of these geese are probably around 1,000 feet or less when they're flying over, because you can actually hear them really clear when they fly. Well, the geese were at a certain focus, and when the 9 disc flew by and I got a still frame off the video, both had about the same focus, which means these disc craft, or whatever these things were not more than maybe 1,000 feet or so above me. Zero sound, no noise of any kind, and they passed. Well, I got 7 frames at 7/10 of a second, something like that. It was so fast, if you wasn't watching the screen, you'd have never seen it. But I have it in slow-mo, and you can actually see them pass by real slow. I've caught that one. I've caught many other disc craft, just single disc craft, just as clear as you want to get it, passing by to the right, passing by to the left, or just streaking across. When they're further out away from you, they go by a lot slower. When they pass by that fast in front of the screen, they're very, very close to you. That is some of my experience of a lot of the things that I have seen pass by while I was videotaping the moon. What I've been doing, and some of the things I'd like to do in the future, what I'm doing now is I don't have a chance to shoot a lot during the nighttime because, of course, here in Texas, it's hot, steamy, and mosquitoes about the size of, well, you know how big they are. So I don't really get a chance to do a lot of video at night because of those conditions and stuff. But I do take my cameras with me during the daytime, and I shoot the sky during the daytime. So I've kind of shifted things around, and because in the daytime you can shoot the sky within 10 to 15 minutes, I always catch a disc craft or something, a blurred object flying in front of my camera pretty much every time I shoot. I've got one particular one where I was going up to the air show in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I just had my camera out and I was shooting the sky. And this particular jet was about 2 miles from me, about 2,000 feet up, because it was circling around the Bush Intercontinental, come back around and going to land. And I didn't see it when I was videoing it, but when I reviewed the video, you can see I had 3 frames out of 60 frames. The jet would be here. The first frame, the object was at this point. The second frame, it was between me and the jet, so you could see it on the belly of the plane. So it covered the belly. It was a disc-looking craft like this. And then the third frame, it was past the jet. In the video, the jet never moved because it was 3 frames in that 1 second that it was passing by. So it was just like 0.3 of a second, or whatever that is, whatever the speed of this thing could possibly be. It passed by. So that was a very good, clear one that I've got there, but I've get multiple shots of just different craft flying the skies. I had one particular military guy tell me that these are high-speed drones flying by. Whether they're high-speed drones or not, I don't know. It could be anything. Is it ET? I don't know. I don't know that ETs fly in formation, so you go take it from there. But anyhow, that's some of the stuff that I like and some of the direction that I'm heading with my shooting during the daytime and at night. People are looking at the world, questioning everything now. And people say, well, why are people questioning everything? It's because we've been lied to. What I have found, a lot of things that you think, they say it's this way. Well, if it's this way, it's probably just the opposite of what it's been told. We have been manipulated, deceived, lied to on every level, every aspect, every level of authority, governments, there's always somebody lying to you. And probably the next person you talk to that will just be holding a conversation, somewhere in that conversation, that will tell you a little white lie because they can't tell you the truth on everything. So everybody is now questioning everything across the board of every level. And of course, a lot of it, they're venting a lot of people who's been lying, those who've been stealing from us, and a lot of other gruesome things have been happening in this world. They're questioning it. Now it's coming to light and they're putting more focus on it. But yeah, that's why a lot of people are asking so many questions. That's why people are questioning everything. Yeah.
It was sometime in the 90s that I began to realize that the sky didn't look the same way that it looked when I was young, and it was wholly due to what's now come to be called chemtrails. And these aren't arguable. I've spent thousands of hours filming these things, and there are still people to this day, it's hard to imagine, that want to call us conspiracy theorists, and yet the real sad truth is it's been admitted flat out now. When I first started filming them, it was denied, denied, denied. It's admitted by the powers that be now that weather modification and the spraying of certain things has been going on for a long time. Admitted. There's no argument there anymore. To jump to the point here, I spent many thousands of hours filming what I call chemtrails, and regularly these little white dots that we came to call orbs would be in and around the chemtrails. One of the most interesting pieces of footage you're going to see in this film is one that came to be called the shooting orb. And what you will see is a chemtrail that's not very high compared to some, that is pushing kind of southwest in San Diego, California. You will see a little, what we call an orb, drop down into the chemtrail and then push against the wind, traveling roughly northeast in the chemtrail, and it fires off like, I don't have the descriptive words, a little plasma beam or something. I don't have words to describe it. You'll see in the footage what we're talking about. The orb, there's a chemtrail, the orb comes down and it arcs against the wind. The chemtrail is pushing with the wind and it levels off and it goes and it just shoots a couple times in the trail. It's inexplicable. It's literally inexplicable. I don't know how to explain it. Again, I assume it's human technology. And there was a point where someone in Hawaii filmed an aircraft from, I think it was the Air Force, dropping similar looking things to these orbs, which in and of itself is not definitive proof of anything, but I would mention that. But of everything I've filmed, there are 3 pieces of footage which are inexplicable. Any of the lunar waves, what's called the vortex, which can only be seen by a full spectrum camera, and that shooting orb. They're amazing. I don't have language to describe them, and you'll see them all here. So in this clip I was shooting before I'd upgraded to good equipment. If you look in the upper right, there is an object that looks like it's almost blazing coming in. I could see this with my naked eyes. I knew I was filming it, but as it goes through the clouds here, you can actually see it disturb the clouds. There were clips that followed this for a while, and it tracked next to that chem plane the whole time I could see it. But it is really quite an astounding clip when you zoom in on it. It almost looks like the object is blazing, but again, it stays equidistant from the chem plane there spraying, and there is no doubt you can see the shadows of it and the disturbance of the cloud as it goes through. And I will say again, anyone who takes a camera out in the daytime and films the sky in the way I'm showing you here, within a very short period of time, you'll begin to catch interesting things. So many things up there to see that most of us have no idea. At some point when, you're just an average person, and for me, I spent nearly 4 solid years with a camera, a telescope pointed up at the sky day and night and filmed more amazing things than anyone else I'm aware of actually right now. Maybe there's other people out there that like to be more private, hard thing to know. But you begin to understand that what you've been told is not accurate. It just isn't. And I launched a podcast to put out another perspective, a point of view. And the average person listening will think, what's this crazy guy talking about? But I'll give you an example. And this is part of the problem. If I told you the Big Bang is provable nonsense, the average mind is going to think, oh, here's a conspiracy theorist, but it's not true. The laws of thermodynamics prove that the Big Bang theory is nonsense. And you can go online right now and find plenty of honest, hardworking physics individuals that will tell you the exact same thing. It's just they're not the popular guys. They're not the guys naming the TV show Big Bang Theory or pushing these ideas, trying to make the idea popular. So as just an individual listening to this, I would ask, if we have a law like the laws of thermodynamics, does that mean something? It's not a theory, it's a law. And if you further understand that for the Big Bang to be true, the law, I think it's the third law, I've forgotten, of thermodynamics has to be incorrect. What does that tell you about what all our textbooks have been packed with? A lot of it is provable nonsense. And that's what launched me, just to try to challenge things, to try to get to the bottom of what's actually a closer description of this place we exist. Because what the space agencies have done, in my view, is completely misdescribe the world and what's around our world. This lunar wave clip shot with the full spectrum camera through an 11-inch scope is complete providence. I had shut down the visual spectrum equipment because it couldn't see through the clouds. This is actually chemtrailing, making all these clouds. But the visual spectrum could not see through the clouds anymore. And by chance, the cloud cover breaks enough, even though the full spectrum camera is peering through, to see the lunar wave. And you can notice, as you begin to see the lunar wave, that the clouds just open up at that second. Pretty fortunate clip here. Much of this world runs on the idea of belief, and this isn't a shot at religious ideas at all. It's the opposite of that. It's a shot at what we've been trained to do in school. Belief becomes the enemy of knowing at some point, because once you believe a thing, you never challenge it. You just accept it. It's a choice you make, and that's what it is. It's a choice. And when you begin to realize that all these things that are in textbooks and filling our world, the moment you challenge them, you understand there's a difference between belief and knowing. And I don't know, in a lifetime, do we ever know as much as we want? Probably not. I don't think that's possible, but I certainly understand that just because someone in authority tells me something these days, I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to take it on myself to challenge it. If I can't challenge it, I'll put it in my wait till later pocket, when I can challenge it. Because I've come far enough, challenging enough things to understand there's a lot more to know about this place we exist than has been told us. So as I've mentioned earlier, when I posted the first lunar wave, a floodgate opened and interest peaked really quickly. And it was back in a time when there were so many so-called, I don't really consider them news, but so-called news outlets online. And what they would do is go to YouTube and take clips that people had made with or without their permission. They're called news, so I guess they get to do that. And they were running footage of mine all the time. And it led to places as well known as Newsweek wanting to interview me. I did 2 interviews with Newsweek. Actually, the gentleman who did that was a very fair man. His name was Max. And what I'm pointing out here is it's strange to go from a person who's just filming in your backyard, you put these clips out, and all of a sudden you're on the world stage. The Daily Mail in the UK, Gizmodo, all these places embedding your YouTube clips. And it's what let me know that not only what I was doing was interesting, but that it had value, and that somewhere deep within most of us, when we see images of what I will call the sky clock brought to you in HD, it sparks a very primordial interest in human beings. And that is another thing that really fueled me to keep endeavoring to film nonstop as much as I could. So this is a heck of a unique clip. It's clearly an object. It clearly has what I'm calling 3 thrusters. And much of the still work that was done on this, we could blow it up and see, in fact, that it is some kind of a mechanical craft. And that varies greatly from so many of the things we're going to present here. It wasn't fully dark when I shot this, and I was able to track it beyond the moon for quite some time. It's rather unfortunate that at one point I lost it. I found it again, and I did the same thing and then gave up, and then ended up reacquiring it, but couldn't get the camera going quick enough. In my view, this is absolutely 100% human technology, and it is certainly within our atmosphere. There was a lot of work done by actually a lot more people than just myself that tried to determine if they could attach this to some launch or some craft that was reported at the time. We had a lot of people give a lot of input, but from my point of view, it was never ID'd for certain. It's a very interesting piece of footage. Another part of things that goes on in our world is, like, we're all told we went to the moon, and, that was way back in the 60s, and we still haven't been back. And most people are willing to overlook that. But what I began to realize as I finally took apart satellites, did all the time out there filming, did the tracking, did all these things, and realized everything you can film is in our atmosphere, and you can't film a thing that would match the time or the description of a satellite. And as a matter of fact, there is no video. At the filming of this film, I am not aware of any video of a satellite in space doing. You'd think an astronaut, a so-called astronaut, might point a camera out the window to show these thousands of satellites doing their amazing work. It's not true. But to get back to the point, we have all these, space agencies. Now it's like SpaceX. They launch sports cars into space. How many people listening to this actually think that Elon Musk launched a sports car into space? I mean, it's a free country. I know censorship is rampant right now, but for right now, we can all have an idea and study and come to conclusions. It wasn't too long ago that a keyboard weighed 6 pounds or something. You were told every one of those pounds to go up into space was $10,000. But Elon Musk, he'll put a sports car up there. I forget the numbers, negative 400 in the shade, positive 500 in the sun. I've forgotten the numbers, but it's all ludicrous. And this game, this shell game, keeps getting played. They keep telling you that they're going back to the moon and they're going to Mars and they're going all these places. And I came to understand that if you study what the oldest texts we can get our hands on say, they're trying to tell you the truth. Nothing leaves this place, not with your body anyhow. I don't know the metaphysical side of things. Maybe a soul in meditation, or maybe when we sleep, it's possible to leave here. I don't know about those things. I'm no master of meditation. My point here is that it pretty certainly looks like we're in the idea of what an alchemical flask would be in a sealed environment. The old elemental ideas being, everything that's here is here, and it's this perfect system. One thing transforms into another. Water is water, then it transmutes into air, and then at some point it comes again. Those ideas are sound and they're solid. And they're put forward by people who are respected. But what's funny about it is, while we may respect the work of Omar Khayyam or Marcus Aurelius or Manilius or any of these seemingly very old voices that thought in the way I just described, that respect ends as soon as they say one thing that doesn't jive with science. And I'm here to tell you that science has become a bit of a religion. And what's going on is the space agencies are using it to delude us all. And those seem like harsh things to say, but I've spent enough years looking now, and we're not being told the truth. That's all there is to it. Years later, when I started my podcast, we had a guest on who pointed out that the flat Earth movement started within 30 days of the posting of the first lunar wave. And Jason and I were like taken aback. We'd never really thought about this, and we went back to confirm it's absolutely true. As a matter of fact, there were some big companies who wanted to work with us for footage who went and found the same thing. So it's been confirmed that the flat Earth movement may have partially been fueled by the lunar wave footage because people began to question what they're seeing when they look up at the moon. And while I don't count myself a flat earther, I think it's absolutely essential what that community is doing. For me, I don't want to inherit the belief system, the newest map they've come up with, or any of that. I want to do my own thing, so I don't count myself a member, but I support them because I think it's critical that people question things that are not supposed to be questionable, in the same way that I question the moon and the sun and all the stars that we look at every night. So I think it's a critical piece of the puzzle, but it's quite possible that the first lunar wave may have fueled the start of all that because people began to say, wait a minute, I thought I knew everything I needed to know about the moon. So, yeah. A lot of people ask why would they bother to fake all these things and lie about these things, and I imagine we could sit here and come up with 50 answers to that question if we wanted to. But at the end of the day, if you don't know where you exist, you don't know where you can go from there. But what's more is this world is misdescribed. That's what started the flat earth movement. And if you're an open-minded enough individual to understand that all those people have every right in a free society to challenge these unchallengeable things, like where do we live, you start to understand that the maps that we've been shown are not correct. And anyone who wants to be open-minded and take a look can prove this. If you take a Mercator projection map and put it next to a Gall Peters, just go online and look at all the projections you can get and lay them one next to the other, and you'll see that none of them match. That problem should have disappeared the first time this world was imaged from space. So to see a large landmass, it should look like it looks from space. When you get down into a map that would take you down streets, that any problem of supposed curvature or anything else would go away. The point is you don't even know what the shape of the continent, certainly you don't know what it looks like, and you can prove that. Look at a Gall Peters, look at a Peters, look at all the different projections that they've made using the argument that we had to make it flat, but there was curvature. Anyone with an open mind will go out and say, well, wait a minute, what are all these people on about? And they'll do a simple test. They'll find a long body of water that goes more than about 10 miles, and they'll see if they can see too far. I did it with high-end optical tools. I'm here to tell you we can see too far. And that tells you truths about the supposed truths we've been told. It's really all there is to it. And when you come to understand that even the maps are incorrect, heck, are there land masses we've heard nothing of? These are hard things to know. But these are where the ideas will lead a mind that's ready to challenge. And as we come into what I consider to be a new era here, you're going to find a lot of people out in the world challenging things that are supposed to be unchallengeable. And that's absolutely what a free society does, that exercises free speech. And if they're wrong, well, then maybe they look silly. If I'm wrong, maybe then I look silly, but I'm willing to take that step. Because if you step up to the plate and you strike out, at least you stepped up to the plate. And that's what you're going to see many people doing now, is stepping up to the plate. And those things that stick to the wall, smarter people or more people will get a hold of that and they'll take it further. But the things we know now that we didn't know 20 years ago are astounding. We know what the space agencies have done. They have not told us the truth, and that is all there is to it. And any mind out there that wants to honestly challenge what we've been handed will know that very quickly. And we have never seen an accurate map of the land masses of this world. And any person who wants to go out and challenge it will know that quickly. And these are abrupt things to say, but I would remind you, in a free society, in a free world, everyone has the right to challenge these things. And again, if they're wrong, then maybe they look silly for a period of time. I'm willing to take that. I accept that risk. I think it's a real shame that we have cast aside the ideas about our world that were viewed through a natural lens from the classics. people like Plato, Aristotle, who supposedly brought us the idea of the fifth element, which was actually iterated much earlier in India as the Akasha, maybe could be compared to the Akashic record idea. But these old natural science-based ideas from learned men, some of them considered adepts, they were trying to tell us some true things. And the problem becomes is that the things that they said that don't jive with modern science are thrown out the window. We have people like Einstein who just so randomly threw out the idea of ether, never giving an experiment or a reason why, just making the dictate that it didn't exist. I think these things are a shame. And I think those great names, those Platos, those Aristotles, Marcus Aurelius, Omar Khayyam, the poet, many others that we could name here who viewed the world through an elemental natural science lens were really trying to tell us critical things about our world. During the course of all this, the first lunar wave that you'll see, it's called the 2012 lunar wave, was filmed near the stated equinox, the stated fall equinox, which in older times may have been referred to as the Silver Gate, the spring equinox being the Golden Gate, which that name is actually encoded in the bridge in San Francisco. The Golden Gate Bridge encodes that older kind of lost idea. But the 2012 lunar wave was filmed within days of the stated equinox. And as I began to study that footage for years with many people, we came across a truth, and that's that the equinoxes are broken according to the old texts. There are supposed to be 2 days of balance in this world, one at the spring equinox, one at the fall equinox, where day and night are equal. Even the German word meaning equal night, equinoct. These things are not true, and we've observed it, and we've mapped it, and we understand that not only are they not true, there seem to be places in the world that have no equal day or night in certain years that may be just a few hundred miles apart. But what we certainly determined was whether or not you're experiencing what we call an equinox, which is actual equal day and night, depends on your geographic location. As an example, in this year, it was announced, I think, I forget whether it was the 21st, 22nd, something like that, the equinox was announced. What we found was that in the northern part of the United States, it would be the 25th, the mid a day later, the southern a day later. And when you begin to understand these things, you begin to wonder, why are they telling us today is the equinox, when even if equinoxes functioned, which they do not, according to the old texts, why would you call out a day when it's wholly dependent on your geography? You begin to learn these critically important things. And that is a thing that I still cannot resolve an answer to, because it's going to relate directly to the motion of this place we call the world, if there is such a thing, and it's going to relate directly to the movement of the sun and moon. In other words, something's misdescribed here, because truly, if the sun came to 0 degrees of declination, there would in fact be an equal day and night for all the people who are experiencing the sun that day in that way. And that's not what we can observe and prove is going on. So I filmed just about every eclipse. Well, I did film every eclipse in the period of time that I began filming up until roughly 2016, even caught the full solar eclipse in 2017. There were a number of solar eclipses. There were a number of lunar eclipses that I filmed. We'll probably show you some of the footage in this film of the things that I shot. And these are critical things. People should always go out when these special events happen. There's probably a negative connotation by those who track the sky when an eclipse of any kind happens, when the light is being blocked. But I came to understand that during a solar eclipse, the moon is playing no role. And the average person is going to roll their eyes. I know they're gonna, because they've been told their whole life that that's the moon going in front. But I tested it over multiple eclipses with full spectrum cameras, with light obliteration techniques, with very good telephoto equipment, with doublers, with 2 different telescopes, with any number of filter systems. I started by trying to do one simple thing. We're told that the sun is 93 million miles away from us, and we're told that the moon is roughly 250,000. It's actually a bit further, but for the sake of conversation, roughly 250,000 miles away. So I reasoned that if the sun is about to cover the brightest thing that we know exists, called our sun, at 93 million miles, then it's going to be backlit by the brightest thing we are aware of, and I should be able to detect it. And I'm here to tell you the moon cannot be detected at any point during an eclipse. You'll start to see the little bite taken out of the sun. You'll see that blacked out portion. At that time, you cannot detect a moon. You can't detect it as it's in further, as it covers the whole thing, or as it exits. At no time can you detect the moon. Astronomy is going to have an answer to this, which I also don't accept, that there are these certain special eclipses where you can detect the moon. I've never witnessed one in my lifetime or seen acceptable evidence of anyone filming one of these special eclipses that lets me know that is true, but it sets aside the fact that we understand the sun is an infinite light source, which is actually hard to look up online now, but it is. I've known this for years. Used to be able to look it up online. An object being hit by an infinite light source, which the sun is, will cast a shadow, and regardless of where you move that infinite light source, the shadow will remain the same size as the object casting it. And that is the situation that we find from the older descriptions of the sun being an infinite light source in modern eclipses. And in this last one in 2017, the first big full eclipse in a long time, we were told the shadow was 70 some miles across. If all those things are true, it means the thing that eclipsed the sun is 70 some miles across. And the average person's going to hear that and they're going to think, man, that boy's been smoking peyote, but I can assure you, I don't smoke peyote. I did direct observation. I'm reporting what I came away with. But I can tell you certainly that the moon plays no role in a solar eclipse. And there is another place in the world that will tell you a similar thing, and that is the old Indian or Vedic traditions, where they claimed it was done by what's called nodes. And anyone interested could take a look at those ideas. Here's the thing I would invite anyone to do. If you can spend any amount of time out filming the sky in the day or in the night, and you do it regularly, it won't be long before you film interesting things. To put it on the record, everything that you're going to see in this film, I filmed firsthand personally, or my wife was there filming, and it's provably within our atmosphere. Nothing I have ever filmed is in what we would call space, and there's an optics expert that helped me value out pixels and the systems I'm using, stills versus video, the scope, all of it, to make calculations. At one point, the Huffington Post ran some of my footage. They got an FBI expert and the head of MUFON, of course, to state in an article on the Huffington Post that Crow doesn't understand his equipment. He doesn't understand what he's filming. And I'd had enough at that point. I had years of experience under my belt. I'd been doing this seriously. So I went and got an optics telescope expert. We calculated this stuff out so that we had a pretty narrow value for a pixel at, say, half geosynchronous orbit, which would be 11,000 miles. Huffington Post said, Crow clearly doesn't know what he filmed here. This is a satellite in half geosynchronous orbit. And I begged to differ. So I went out, I got the hard, cold facts with an optics expert, exactly calculated to the system I was using, and actually then again on the later systems I had. And what we discovered was that if, in fact, what they were calling a satellite was truly 11,000 miles away and half geosynchronous, it would be 600 to 700 feet long, proving outright that that's nonsense. And, as time went on, we began to realize that all these things, there are little things up there all the time, but they're much closer to us than most people think. And again, I invite people to film. You will film these things if you film regularly. At first, not too many people had shot them. As people began to see what I was doing and more people started filming the night sky, they began to confirm. These are not balloons, well, not like shopping mall balloons. They may be balloons of some kind, hard to know. There's been satellites filmed now hanging from balloons. But these other people confirmed over and over the things that I have shot. So there's all that. In my view, for the people who want to take an interest and get out and try to add something to what we can learn in the modern age by filming the sky, I think the sun is going to be the next big thing. During the course of my equipment upgrades, I got what's called a hydrogen alpha solar telescope. It's not very big. The aperture is about like that. It's about that long. But what it does is it films that spectrum, H alpha. And what I do is I put that telescope on top of my big one so I have a tracking mechanism, and I piggyback it and then put a camera. And I've used all the cameras that I have. But there is something that I will mention here. So many people remember decades ago that the sun was yellow, more yellowy or orangey, and that the sun is pure white now. I have that memory too. And there is some photographic examples to back it up, but maybe that's not definitive proof until someone really digs in to try to show definitive proof. But here's what I can tell you. I first got that solar scope, maybe it was 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something, 4 years ago, I think, close to. And when I first viewed through it, one of the things hydrogen alpha lets you do is see all the surface detail of the sun. Looks like the skin of an orange and the little flames, which are called prominences. That's what hydrogen alpha does for you. The flip side of that is if I just took a solar filter that cuts down 99% of the light, you'll just see a disk, a black and white disk, and you'll see maybe sunspots. That's it. But with the H alpha, you can see the surface detail of the sun and you can see the prominences. At the time I began with that brand new telescope, there was all this detail and all these things going on we could film, and it slowly diminished. The mainstream view of this will tell you that the sun has an 11-year cycle or this cycle or that cycle, and that we're at a minimum right now. But I have witnessed through direct observation a true shift. Almost no surface detail on the sun right now, and the prominences that I have seen recently, although I could be filming more, I must admit, have been minuscule compared to what was going on back then. But the main takeaway here is, having watched the chemtrails all these years, almost everywhere I've been, those trails get sprayed across the ecliptic or the path of the sun and the moon. In other words, those trails are blocking a lot of sunlight. Regardless of whether people want to accept that it's been admitted that they're doing this, they're modifying the weather, basically, among other things. The amount of sunlight that has been blocked is astounding. And there have been a number of people who have filmed the sun at rise and set and filmed anomalies. And I'll leave it at that because I haven't filmed them. But to get back to the point I opened with, if you want to get interested in what you see in this film and take part in film, in my view, the sun is gonna be one of the next big deals. Another big part of the reason for doing this film is not just to demonstrate all the strange things that anyone listening to this that wants to take the time to look up and film the sky, not much time will elapse before they start filming interesting things. That's a promise. You have to do it regularly and you have to give it some time. You don't just do it for 5 seconds. Set aside an hour regularly to go out and do it, and it won't be long before you start to pick up unusual things. You want to dedicate 8 hours a night, then you're really opening a door. One of the main gains that I made out of all this was coming to understand what I now call the sky clock. In my view, the sky, the nighttime sky, the sun and the moon are a clock. It's the clock for this world. And it tells us when the seasons change, when we can plant, when we can harvest, when we better have food set aside because cold weather is coming. These are things that the modern grocery store and modern life has pushed far away from most minds, but they are critically important things. And I will assure you, one thing that I learned in spades is that this world is still run by the sky clock, by the most powerful organizations in this world. Go someday, just do a random search for when Fortune 500 companies are set up. You'll find a ton of them are in the spring when all that energy is going to release back into the world. And nature is showing us that all the trees are going to get leaves and all the animals are having babies or starting to get ready to have babies, all this huge energy release. And as I mentioned earlier, and it may be in front of this by the time we edit together, all the censorship is coming to you in the fall. And there's a reason for that. During the course of this, I came to understand that the older ways and the older authors who were trying to tell us all a true thing, there were things I could verify. And one thing that I learned in spades was that when we pass the high point of the sun in the summer, or the summer solstice in June, as soon as we go past that day, human consciousness and spiritual endeavors of human beings slowly starts to fall off. And it will fall off more and more and more until we reach the so-called equinox in September. And then the real fall happens as we start to head into the sign of what's called Scorpio, and all the way down to the winter solstice, which here in the West we call that Christmas. And we fall. We diminish in our capabilities and our spiritual intent and all these things. And I've seen it. I know it to be true now. And as soon as you pass that low point of the sun, lo and behold, the sky clock shows us a new thing that's happened many times before, but new for that year. Lo and behold, the nights will begin to become shorter and the days longer, all the way up to spring. And so now when you look at world events, I would urge all of you to determine, where am I in the course of what's been called the acceptable year of the Lord in Western religious texts? Where are you? Are you at the spring equinox? Are you at the summer solstice or the high mighty point of the sun? Are you at the fall equinox where equality is supposed to reign? Or have you fallen down towards the low point, or what we call Christmas, or what has been allegorized for all time as hell? Where in that cycle are you? And look at the world events, and you will know something critical about what those old authors were trying to show us. Another thing that I'll add about the importance of the sky clock to try to prove in a modern mind that now uses a wristwatch or a cell phone to determine what time it is and not understand that the time they're being shown is incorrect, that the sun is the only gauge of where you are within a day, and the moon used to be once upon a time, a month was called a month. There's a reason for that. These were the true divisions of time that accurately showed you, hey man, it's sunrise. Look, the sun's coming up, not some artificial mechanism which approximates what time it is. I will add this. I've been out in nature to simply observe it. And I understand here on the East Coast that when the horseshoe crabs come in, it's because of the cycle of the moon. I understand that on the Great Barrier Reef, there's a day every year, I forget whether it's November, where the entire reef spawns all at once, releases its sperm and its eggs to replicate. That's based on the sky clock. There are endless examples I could sit here and give you to try to instill the importance of the sky clock in the natural world we live in, which is quickly being replaced by technology. But let's just suffice it to say that the next time you look down and your cell phone tells you it's noon, I would take a bet that it is not, because noon doesn't occur until the sun is at the apex of its arc over your head on that given day, also known as solar noon. That's the only noon that's real. Everything else is artificial. The animals know the truth. It's just us human beings that have been led astray with technology. All right, so this is an interesting clip. That's the sun that we see with our eyes every day, and this is being shot with a hydrogen alpha telescope with a double stack. If you look at the top of the frame, you'll see there's another object skipping across the top. There's the sun we see with our eyes, but keep your eye on the top of the frame here as we slide the sun out of frame. You'll see a thing come in. So this is what we call the second sun that we filmed. We vetted this for years and years, took off the double stack, did all this testing. In one of the views, you're going to see that I'm putting a long cardboard tube over it, but it appears that this is another body. And there's so much footage on YouTube now of double suns and all kinds of stuff that I think there's merit here. But people are going to need to be able to go out and replicate what we've done here. You know, Jason, I did this. I think the first time I did this was in March. And right here, what you're seeing is the cardboard tube going over the end of the solar scope to eliminate any possibility of lens flare. But Jason, I did this in March the first time of 2016. And what led me to do this was finding a big bright spot about a quarter of the sky away from a full moon with the full spectrum camera, which got me searching around. And again, in frame here is the sun we see, and you can see legitimate lens flare there. Is there anything we should add here, Jason?
I think it's very important to explain to anyone seeing this to understand why this isn't just a reflection inside the telescope, and it is, in fact, a second object in the sky.
All right, so when I first shot this, I was very conscious of, I didn't have near the usage time on the hydrogen alpha solar telescope that I did just looking at the moon. I probably had a couple hundred hours of solar scope time, so I was very concerned that I wasn't overlooking something, and we did all kinds of tests. I came back a number of times to do this, and it was not until we did the Falconelli research that I came back to this footage in 2019 and realized what I had likely filmed here. I think one of the main takeaways here, Jason, is even though I used a hydrogen alpha telescope, and one of the versions here was shot with the double stack taken off that telescope and a full spectrum camera put on. But the takeaway here is I'm reasonably sure that this can be replicated at sunrise and sunset in the visual spectrum.
And this is the sort of thing that a lot of people who own P900s and P1000 cameras can actually do for themselves.
That's absolutely correct. And what they will do is just get a solar filter, which basically knocks down the brightness of the sun by 90-some%, most of them. And what you do is you get the sun at rise or set, and you overexpose, you underexpose, and you look all around. And after you've done this or tried to do this, you'll also realize that quite often when the sun is rising or setting, chemplanes are spraying. So there it is, man, potentially a double sun. All of us in this world right now are about to witness a new era. At the same time, there is an awakening taking place as human consciousness and spirits lift to new levels. It's easy to fall victim to half-truths and outright lies that surround us, delivered daily by news and media gone wild. These can be very trying times, but we're not helpless. Each of us has the ability to help shape the coming age, which seeks to replace the natural world with artificial technologies. After all, there is no lie in nature, and I hope that the people who see this film will begin to look up again. The sky clock is the only true measure of time and season in our world. Your cell phone will not accurately tell you when it is truly noon, but the sun will, and most of us have lost sight of this truth. Every holiday or world event you have ever seen is geared to the sky clock, and it is my hope that this film will inspire people to look up again and form a new bond with the natural world. Truly, the natural cycles of this world are a precious thing to understand, embrace, and protect as we head into an era of technology beyond imagination. The natural world is a perfect system from our point of view, and technology is a pale shadow of our natural world.